purchase or a lease or a swap, all things that we have not had council direction on. And when this was agendized or put on our tentative agenda, I spoke up a couple weeks ago about an interest in having a public session, but none of us knew until we received a confidential staff memo that laid out kind of the framework of what would be discussed and the basis for that. Only at that time were we able to see what staff intended to have discussed at a closed session. And as our city attorney explained, the Brown Act only allows terms and price of a real estate transaction to go into closed session. I'm at a loss as to how we could have that discussion without having gone through the narrowing of alternatives of which method we would want to pursue on to acquire the land and how much land. These are things that are addressed in our confidential memo. We can't discuss that at this time publicly, although I actually believe that much of that confidential memo needn't be confidential, that we can have that information shared in an open session.
Councilmember Burt, would you like to make a motion then?
I move that we do not have a closed session on this item and that we ask staff to agendize an open session.
Second. You, right? I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Stone, you're seconding it.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So Councilmember Burt moved, second by Vice Mayor Stone. And now, Councilmember Burt, if you'd like to speak to your motion.
Yeah, sure. So I've said most of it, but in addition to kind of the question of how we can legally have this depth of a discussion in a closed session, we have an equally or more important issue of the need for a public process. This is going to be, whatever we do at Coverly has been lingering out there for decades. This is going to be a very important decision, hopefully a very positive move forward. But the public input on this is not only their right, but it is a value that we place in hearing all the different stakeholders and exploring all the alternatives in the sort of way that we do as a public body. So those are the reasons that I don't support the closed session tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I concur with Councilmember Burt. For me, my reason seconding this is really more of an agreement with him on it being a transparency issue and a sequencing of events. And to me, the sequencing of this is backwards. I think we need to start with that open public discussion with the community, receiving that input, us making a policy decision in a public meeting before we then get into the details of terms and potential payments. I thought what one of the public speakers, Ms. Heel, said in her public comment saying, process needs to be respected and open, and this doesn't feel like that to me. And I completely agree with her that transparency is key here. And this is, as Councilmember Burt was getting into, this is going to be one of the largest projects that the city is undertaking in the next several years. It's been ongoing for decades now, and to start this process off with in this way is not the way we want to be able to gain that community trust and share in that community partnership. So that's why I'm supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Vinker.
Thank you, Mayor Koo. And we all agree that something must be done about Coverly because it's a community gem that is crusted over with the detritus of many good uses and the deterioration born of time. And we are all frustrated with the delay and eager to see this move forward. Coverly is somewhat of an embarrassment to the city today when it could be a source of pride. And so I commend the staff for the research and analysis that was shown in the closed session memo and the initiative to get us going on Coverly. And amidst the difference of opinion and the difficult history of planning for this space, I believe, like my colleagues that have spoken so far, that we need to maximize our transparency and community input. I like what I read in the closed session memo, but I don't know that we are yet at a point to have such a discussion. I also appreciate the very difficult chicken and egg nature of this problem. How do you know what land deal to strike until you know what you'll use it for? But how do you know what to build until you know how much land you have? So there's no right answer, and I admire staff for moving on this, but I believe too that we need more transparency in these early stages, and we'll be voting for this motion.
Councilmember Lithcott Haynes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm inclined to support the motion as well. My one caveat would be just the request that if we are punting this, that we don't punt it very far. We really need to get going in these conversations. I think we all agree. It's simply the fact of a very packed schedule. Our agendas for the next few weeks and months are set. And so I'm not sure how we're going to switch things up. It's a Tetris puzzle or a Jenga puzzle. But I'm just hoping that Cubberley doesn't, the piece that is Cubberley doesn't fall to the ground, but gets picked up and slotted in sometime soon.
Councilmember Burt, did you have more to add?
Yes, I neglected to mention that we have, the mayor appointed an ad hoc committee on Cubberley, which has not met and which could provide a valuable role to the council in fleshing out alternatives, offering alternatives or recommendations, engaging with the public more. I'm not envisioning that instead of a council session, but when we do have that, we should be thinking about what would be the appropriate role of the ad hoc to help accelerate this process and have a deeper dive.
Thank you. And the ad hoc committee consists of myself, Councilmember Lithcott Haynes, and Councilmember Burt. So I would like to add, thank you for bringing forward this motion, both you and Vice Mayor. You know, after reading and looking through all the grand jury reports from 2004 and 2005 to the joint use agreement and what has transpired in the last few years in terms of complying with the agreement, it does concern me. And I do find that we do need to do this more in a transparent manner, more inclusive manner. So I will be supporting the motion and would like to emphasize that to ask staff not to take too long in coming back for a public session with the community. And I don't see any more lights, so if you will take the vote, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stone,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Mayor Ku,
Yes.
Councilmember Burt,
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott Haynes. Yes, motion carries.
All right, very good. We don't have a closed session. And so we're going to move to our next agenda item, which is, thank you. Agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, just wanted to note for your awareness and public awareness that while there's no formal change to your business tonight, we did issue an amended agenda that includes an informational report, AA1, that reports on the Palo Alto and Bloomington, Indiana sibling cities annual report for 2022 and upcoming events. I'll make reference to that in my manager's comments in a few minutes, but just wanted to note that document is part of your packet.
Thank you. And then, so with that, we will go to public comments on items that are not on the agenda.
Currently, there are no hands raised and no request to speak.
Very good. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. All right, we'll go to council member questions, comments, and announcements. If there's any, please turn on your light. Doesn't look like there's any. All right, we're very efficient tonight. We're moving on to our consent calendar. And do we have any public comments or members of the public who would like to speak on the consent calendar items?
No hands are raised and there are no requests to speak.
I can't help myself but say, oh, wow. All right, I'll take a motion for, to move the consent calendar.
So move.
Second, you're all so shy. All right, Councilmember Tanaka, I see you had lights.
No on 6.
Councilmember Tanaka registered a no on 6. And when you're ready, you can take our votes.
Councilmember Burt,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stone,
Yes.
Mayor Ku,
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott Haynes,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing,
Yes.
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Tanaka, would you like to speak to your no vote on number 6?
Sure, very briefly. So it's just consistent with my prior one. I think I said what I had to say last time, so that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Tanaka. And with that, we close consent calendar items and we will move to city manager comments.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. See if the city clerk is able to assist with a few slides. Okay, terrific. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, first wanted to note a few upcoming key dates, including a number of both events and just ongoing activities. The first is to note that we are beginning construction of the Bulwer Park expansion. And as such, there will be a groundbreaking Thursday, September 7th. So immediately after Labor Day, this will actually be with the contractor on site and hopefully able to get a few community members out to really note this key milestone leading toward opening of the new expanded park. Next, want to note that we have our upcoming annual community survey that postcards have been mailed to sampling of city residents. As you may recall, this includes both specific statistical sampling as well as the opportunity for all community members to respond to this survey that's done each year. So more information to come, but if you received the postcard, probably has my signature on it. It's legit. And such as it is, we'll be looking for community feedback. Then finally noting our Palo Alto Airport Day. This was an annual event for many years and is back. Will be happening on Sunday, September 24th at Palo Alto Airport. More detail on that on the webpage here, cityofpaloalto.org/engage. Next slide, please. Today's rain, boy, we've missed it for a bit of time and maybe a good reminder for us of preparation for the rainy season. And on our webpage, cityofpaloalto.org/prepare for rain has some information for residents homeowners to prepare for the rainy season, including information about the city's participation in community rating system that provides a discount for flood insurance for homeowners that are located in the area requiring flood insurance. And also a number of other resources for the community-wide to get prepared for our rainy season. Next slide, please. Then also some upcoming events. I referenced the informational report that's included in your packet today related to the Palo Alto Bloomington sibling city relationship and the annual report. Also have a number of upcoming events, including an author talk with Douglas Hofstadter. Hope I didn't butcher that too badly, on the topic of AI. It will be streamed at Rinconada Library on September 7th. Also, actually immediately after Labor Day at 4 p.m. I believe simulcast as well in Bloomington. The sibling cities will also be hosting a number of town halls on topics of civic dialogue, and dates shown here, 3 dates, 3 very important topics to all communities. Next slide, please. Then finally, noting upcoming agenda items, as noted, let's see, here we are on August 21st. There is no meeting next week, being the last week of the month. Next meeting will be on Tuesday, September 5th, day after Labor Day, where the council will be interviewing candidates for the Architectural Review Board openings, as well as having a hearing on the 340 Portage or Sobrato proposed development. Then on September 11th, the following Monday, we have a pre-screening for proposed residential project on El Camino Real, follow-up on the permanent parklet program with specifics as directed by council at your last discussion, and report from the Human Relations Commission on HISRAP funding recommendations, and I believe also dates of significance, but we'll confirm that. Then on the 18th, we've got a couple of planning items, as well as a report out recommendations from the Finance Committee related to natural gas purchasing in the winter months and price fluctuations. And then finally, last meeting we have listed here, October 2nd. We've got a proposed amendment to the Stanford University Medical Center Development Agreement, and update an ordinance related to residential electrification requirements. And that concludes my comments. Back to you, Mayor Koo.
Thank you, City Manager Cicada. I see a light from Councilmember Burt.
Yes, there was just one other upcoming event that I realized wasn't mentioned. That is the groundbreaking for the teacher housing tomorrow at 10 at across from the courthouse. One of, I might note, 3 affordable housing projects that are either breaking ground or imminently so. The other is the Mitchell Place, Park Place on Charleston. And then soon to break ground, I believe, is the our transitional housing project with Life Moves. So I think this is those 3 at once are the largest set of affordable housing projects at one time in our community in several decades. So it's really an exciting time on that. Thanks.
Thank you for bringing that up. And okay, and with that, I don't see any other lights, so we can move on to, I just want to ask my colleagues, I show on the agenda that we have a break. And given we've moved so efficiently forward, would you like to take the break of 10 minutes, or would you like to move straight into action items? All right, we're going to move straight into action items. Thank you so much. Our next action item is staff recommends that council direct staff to explore the purchase of property contiguous to the regional water quality control plant to meet current and future needs of the RWQCP. And I give that to you, City Manager.
Yes, and we'll have our Public Works Director, Brad Eggleston, report for staff, and I believe other staff will join in progress.
Good evening, Mayor Koo and City Council. Brad Eggleston, Director of Public Works. Also soon to be with me this evening, given the breakneck speed at which we've arrived at this point in the agenda, will be Kara North, Assistant Director of Public Works, and Jamie Allen, our Treatment Plant Manager. So we're here tonight before you seeking formal direction from the council to explore opportunities to acquire additional land for the Regional Water Quality Control Plant. And really, as we described in the staff report, the Regional Water Quality Control Plant site is quite constrained, and we're becoming more and more concerned about our ability really to conduct our capital construction program and meet what we know will be future needs without additional space. And then the other thing that's happened, we've been in a process of trying to plan, but given the current real estate market for office space, we see that as a real opportunity now to maybe move in advance to secure some additional land and flexibility. And Karen is here. I'm going to turn it to her in a second, but for now, let's go to the next slide.
I apologize for being delayed. You guys surprised me with being early.
So
Karen North, Assistant Director of Public Works. I apologize for being late. My plant manager is also en route as well for questions and answers for you guys.
So just a correction, you weren't late. We were early.
Well,
But thank you.
but we should anticipate when you guys start.
So this is our staff recommendation that we explore purchase of property next to the treatment plant, as well as what the funding options would be to pay for that, and then return to council with any recommendations that come from that work. Next slide.
So this is just to give you a high level view of how congested our existing sewage treatment plant is. As you can see, our plant was originally constructed in 1934, and those predominantly were the larger boxes that you see inside where the primary sedimentation tanks are. And if you haven't been there, you should definitely get a tour, but where our aeration basins are, clarifier and headworks. So that was the original sewage treatment plant. And then you can see the items that are in more of like a light yellow color that we added since, back in the 70s. So we added a couple more clarifiers. We added a dual media filter. We've added ultraviolet light. We removed chlorine. We had added recycled water since then. The new sludge dewatering and hauling building, that's most recent. So as you can see, also the household hazardous waste. So we are definitely filling up our space. And then you can see the items that are in orange. Those are the ones that are currently planning. Some are more detailed planning right now. So the one we have the outfall pipeline projects. I apologize, I don't have the cursor to show where they all are, and it's hard to see, but we also have the advanced water purification facility, the local salt removal facility that we're going to be coming back to discuss to our finance committee on September 19th. Other peripheral that are going with the secondary treatment in terms of the 12 kV, it's upgrading our electrical. And then we're also looking at updating our headworks. So those are all in the long range facility plan that was done in 2012 that we're currently looking to update. So I know it's a lot going on. We also have a lot of underground pipes. So you can see there's the blue, tells you how water moves around within the sewage treatment plant. And then the purple one that you can see on that bottom, that's our 72-inch line. And you see a long orange box, that's where we're trying to fit a laboratory building in. And we're realizing it's just becoming very congested and challenging. So that's why we're part of the impetus of looking for other space and land. Next slide. So as you can see, we're also really limited on areas that we can expand to because we have the airport, we have the road, Embarcadero Road, Paleta Baylands Nature Preserve, wetlands, Bixby, and then an office park. So there's not a lot of space that we can expand to. Next slide. Next slide. Oh yeah, there you go. And then we wanted to give you a comparison to some of the local sewage treatment plants. So Palo Alto is actually the 6th largest sewage treatment plant in the Bay Area. The bottom one is San Jose. That's one of the top 5. As you can see, though, it has 2,600 acres to grow. Their headworks were like, they have 4 to 5 acres dedicated to their headworks, and we have a little postage stamp that we're trying to build. But it gives you a size, an idea of our permitted flow. That's the average dry weather permitted flow. So we're permitted up to 39 million gallons of water per day. And then we can handle up to 80 million gallons of water per day. And then Sunnyvale is smaller. They only take 29. They also have not a lot of acres, but they have a huge amount of acreage of ponds. Silicon Valley Clean Water, just north of here, they have a lot of land. And so while we're all upgrading our sewage treatment plants, they have a little bit more space and capacity to handle things. And then City of San Mateo was originally 17 acres, and they just absorbed an adjacent corpse yard. So they got up to 23 because they're currently rebuilding their plant and doing nutrient removal. So land is definitely a premium in the Bay Area. Next slide. So we also are trying to come up with a long-term space planning solution. If you probably didn't remember or realize, in June, we sent you guys an informational report giving you an update on all the capital work that we've been doing and an update on where we're on with our long-range facility plan. And so if you want to go back to that report, it talks about what's going to potentially be in the request for proposals. And then the relevant topics to space planning is the site planning and the workspace planning, which are in that RFP. So this just gives you an update where we're at. So we have 80 staff that are at the sewage treatment plant. And currently we actually have quite a few that are leasing an adjacent parcel, 1900, which is one of the ones that we're going to be discussing. And that's actually where my office is. And it's so great timing wise that we did that because we're so congested with laydown yards, contractor staging areas, and where the workers actually park their cars for safety. It's good that we've got some of the staff offsite. Next slide. So these are the adjacent properties that we're looking to talk about. And just want to make sure I'm not saying anything I'm not supposed to. Did you get that? But these are the ones that we know in terms of recent sales. And the 1900 Embarcadero. So for many years, we've been eyeing properties, but no one was willing to sell them. 1900 actually went on the market, but it was part of a package sale. So the owner had 6 parcels. So he sold them all together, and then that went for 72.7 million. They think approximately for 1900 was around 15 million, but it was part of that package. And then the other one actually went off market. It had been in the same family for a long time, and that one just sold in 2023 for 4.8 million. So we're hoping that maybe we can try and, if we get authorization, that we can hopefully stay on top of this and maybe start discussions. Next slide. So we're just back to the staff recommendation and discussion. And if there's any comments.
I see Mr. Allen is here. Okay. Hi.
So our plant manager, Jamie Allen, is here. And so if there's any other questions regarding the capital work and space planning constraints and things like that, Jamie's here to also help answer questions.
All right. So why don't we go to public comments?
There are no hands raised and we have no request to speak.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Since I don't see any lights yet, I think I'll just ask. So there are in your slide where there is the properties that are on slide 7. So what about 2425 Embarcadero Way? Is that something that you're also looking?
Apologize. that is another parcel that we'll be investigating. We haven't spent any time on that and there's no recent sale. So we're basically going to try, if we get authorization, to look at any adjacent parcels or nearby.
And just basically monitor all of those and start a dialogue.
Correct.
Okay. And one more question is expansion, right? So long-term, we've seen this plant grow and grow. And so at what point is this, even with these addition properties, at what point will we be needing more space again? So how many years out?
We can't foresee when we're definitely going to need more space. We're trying to look out for 50 years. We're not sure how regulations will change. The large project that we're underway in right now, the secondary treatment upgrade to remove nutrients, that's something new, a new regulation that came down the pipeline. But I think that's why it's so important to get any space we can. And then, there are sewage treatment plants and it costs more money, but you can squish them into much smaller areas. It's an engineering feat and more challenging.
Very good. Thank you. I see lights come on now. Councilmember Vinker.
Thank you, Mayor Ku. I just have a few technical questions for you, but thanks very much for this presentation and thanks for doing the work. And generally, I'm supportive of the updating as well as upgrading. So thank you for this. First of all, before I get to specific questions, just a general question. Is it correct that the regions that we serve, that water consumption and thus wastewater has generally declined in recent years? And so the plant is not at capacity. Not that that doesn't mean it's not, tired, but what impact, if any, does the capacity issue have on these plans and future plans?
So you're correct. The flows have declined. Can you hear me? So the flows have declined over time, but it's a more concentrated waste stream. So the treatment is a little more challenging, and that's part of the upgrades. And then also as we move forward and we look at other options for the water, then there's potentially more treatment that will be needed in the future. And so that's part of the reason why we're trying to leave some space, because who knows what future regulations are going to be.
Okay.
Can I add something onto that?
Please.
So I think Karin was talking about that average dry weather flow, which is 39, but there's also the number of 80 million gallons a day. And that has to do more with heavy rainfall and inflow and infiltration into the sewer system. And just for example, during the New Year's Eve storm last year, I'm not remembering the exact number, but I think we were up in the neighborhood of 70 million gallons a day as a flow rate then. So on the one hand, we've got, decreasing flow during the summertime. On the other hand, we've got potentially more intense winter storms and heavy rainfall that lead to these big events we still need to manage through.
Thank you. That makes sense. And then just quickly, I just wasn't sure what I heard when you were talking about the publicly available recent sale data and 1,900 being part of a 6-parcel sale. So who knows exactly what that chunk is, but I wasn't sure if you said 50 or 15 was a guess.
Approximately 15 is what we
15.
think.
Okay, thank you. It's quite a difference. So I wanted to make sure I heard.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then you mentioned the salt treatment plant. Would that fit within this footprint that we're looking to create?
No, we actually have already identified the salt treatment facility within the 25-acre existing parcel. So this would be looking for future space planning needs, potential laboratory, other things. So it's kind of like it would be an option to land bank to give us some more options in the future.
Okay.
When we do our updating to our long-range facility plan.
And then finally, and Councilmember Lithcott-Hames mentioned the Tetris-like challenge of doing agendas. I feel like you have a Tetris-like challenge here in planning the upgrades and renovation. And if you can just help me remember and/or put in context, in April, we were talking about the Measure E site and, that was, should we have a pyrolysis plant someday? And if so, where should we do it? And should we acquire additional land? And we had we had a motion and we instructed staff, I went and looked it up, said to evaluate other environmental technology and facilities on a portion of the Measure E site and or other lands. So when I first saw this agenda item, I thought, oh, are they coming back with other lands on that? I think that's distinct, but what's the handshake? How do those, does that relate to this?
In the June report, the informational report, we tried to identify all the updates that are going on at the sewage treatment plant. In addition, our long-range facility plan update one of the tasks is to look at the biosolids facility plan and updated technology and spacing requirements. So they all go hand in hand. So right now, if we can determine if we can find other space, then it broadens options in the future.
So would that potentially be on these acquired lands and obviate the need for its own, or would we still then need to acquire additional property for that?
Right now we'll look at the analysis because that was part of council. We'll look at Measure E and we'll look at within our existing confines. The adjacent parcels that we're looking to purchase is also for our lab and staff buildings, since we do have 80 people on site. And we're currently in lease space. And if that building gets sold, I'm not sure where it will go. So I think they are complementary, but they're not necessarily tied specifically together.
Okay, so it's unclear whether that would fit into this footprint we're looking to acquire. Okay.
Correct.
Right.
And also the proximity of where the solids are to where these parcels are.
Sure.
That also is part of the challenge, as you can imagine, the Tetris and where the flows and loads are going. Did you want to add anything, Brad?
Yeah, maybe it's kind of repeating something Karin said, but I think ultimately it's more likely that these spaces would be used for staff buildings and the lab in some fashion, which then frees up other space kind of more in the, like you could say, industrial core of the treatment plant facility for things like solids handling facilities.
Got it. Very helpful. I had one somewhat related question I can hold for a later round, or should I just ask it? Okay. So the one that of the three properties, the one that seems maybe perhaps the most challenging to acquire is the one most proximal to the current site, correct? I think the one to the furthest right in the drawing. What impact would it have if you managed to get the other two and not the one that's right there on this process?
I think we'll take whatever land we can get. They're all adjacent and we can incorporate them into our campus pretty easily. Obviously, the storage facility is close proximity too, but I think we've envisioned all of them are right next door. So be fine. Okay. And we're currently leasing space in the 1900 Embarcadero. So we're actually living where that site is now.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Oh, you're welcome. And I really encourage other council members, if you haven't visited the site for a tour, you should. It really helps with matching what staff is talking about when they're describing all these things on the property. Councilmember Byrd.
Thank you. Excuse me. So first, if you said it, I missed it. The acreage of each of these parcels, they're nearly the same size. But how big are they?
The 1900 Embarcadero is approximately 1.25 acres, and the one adjacent is right about 1 acre.
And 24, 25, about an acre?
Maybe slightly less than 1 acre.
Okay, thanks. And so is the intention, if we acquired any of this, we'd utilize the existing structures and not have to build new structures on these? Is that the plan, or?
Well, certainly for the storage facility, we would be building a new structure. For either of the other two, that's something that would come out through the planning process that we still have ahead of us.
Okay. And on 1900, Karin, you just mentioned that we already lease some of that or all of it? How much?
We lease about 22% of the building.
Okay. And I guess I should have said at the outset, first, as I've said before, the rebuild of this plant is overdue, and I'm really pleased that we and our partners are going forward with the rebuild. Brad and I got to see the Silicon Valley Clean Water Plant recently, saw the acreage they have and the massive rebuild project that they have underway, similar in need to what we have. And then with your reconstruction, you not only have the new buildings you're going to need to construct and some new functions, but you have all the construction staging. What are you envisioning as to where the staging would occur?
Well, currently we are leasing airport land across the street. We are utilizing any bit of land within the sewage treatment plant as staging. And if we end up acquiring one of these parcels, it might also help us with staging.
Okay. And then in terms of, the scale of the project, that was really interesting what Brad emphasized and clarified what you have in your slide, which is the doubling between our normal water flow into the plant and the wet weather. And of course, we have a dedicated stormwater system, unlike San Francisco, where they blend their sewage water and their stormwater and have to treat all of it. But it's really fascinating that we have that much leakage into the storm drain system, I guess. Is it leakage in? Is that the way to describe it? That it doubles?
It is. And I should say to reach that level of flow is rare. So that was a big event, but
yeah. We had a big event.
Happened.
Yeah, we may have more. And do we know how much of that leakage is from our storm drains versus our partner agencies?
Yeah, we have flow meters that show us that, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I mean, we could look at the infiltration from each agency.
Well, I would be interested in that because that is driving the capacity and the scale of this project, and who is managing their storm systems well and who isn't really is a factor. And seems like if we should be looking at the future capacity of the treatment plant in relation to whatever we think is the most cost-effective investment in the storm system, to not have to oversize the treatment plant because of what to some degree may be avoidable infiltration. And I have no idea what may or may not be avoidable. But breaking that down, starting by breaking it down by the city. So when this comes back, which is, part of what the recommendation is to return to the council, I'd like to ask for a deeper dive into the impacts of that wet weather infiltration and whether there are ways that we should be doing a combination of initiatives to right size our new facility. And then I'd also like to have see an analysis of what on the Measure E site would, if we had 5 acres like we were tossing around as a possibility, retain 5 acres for not only future needs like potential pyrolysis of our sludge that is tied into our 2030 carbon neutrality goal now, but other potential uses. What uses on that 5 acres might be for future environmental technologies, and to what degree might it assist in your reconstruction of this site, and how much does that mitigate what we have to buy? It has to be, I think, looked at as a package, and not these sites separate from that discussion and separate yet from what's happening with stormwater infiltration. I think they all come together. It makes it a little more complicated, but I think by necessity, we have to look at all of it together. Thanks.
Vice Mayor Stone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My questions have been asked and answered. The only follow-up that I want to have, Councilmember Vinker asked about Measure E site and that the facility we discussed earlier this year and what that could mean for this. At least say my kind of my perspective from that vote of kind of that request from staff to work with the existing location there in Measure E was really more based on the understanding that was the only site, and we were trying to balance the desire of open space and parkland with our sustainability goals. So I would be very interested to see if when staff does come back, is there a way to really make that fit into the site? Because then I think it really changes my analysis as well as far as whether purchasing these properties really makes sense. So I just wanted to point out that piece is very important for me. Other than that, I have no more questions or comments.
Councilmember Lowen.
Yes, thank you. My primary question on all of this was about Measure E. And I think what the Vice Mayor said is word for word, I would second that motion. We really have to do our beyond best efforts to try to make it fit out there. Excuse me. So it sounds like your initial analysis was we don't know if we're going to have any implications on Measure E, but maybe that means we're going to have more space. That's what I'm hearing is a tentative as you go into that.
Yeah, definitely anything that gives us more space creates more flexibility to potentially do things without the Measure E site.
Yeah. Okay. One question that hadn't already been asked is when I first saw your slides, I thought you meant those two were sold and therefore we were down to one option. But what you're saying is we still have basically three options right there because you can potentially rebuy it. So, right. And so all three of those are going to be looked at. There's one that's not contiguous, and so you don't want that. Is there any use you could get for those that are non-contiguous, like for staff offices and things like that, so that you would expand the number of options of folks that you can negotiate with?
I think we're going to look at all parcels that are adjacent or nearby. The one challenge is the 1900 purchase parcel that's also all the other red that were life sciences buildings. That was a package deal. The owners that purchased that are managers of life sciences. So the anticipation is that they probably will not sell one of the life sciences buildings, but they've expressed actually interest of potentially selling us 1900.
Okay, that's good information to have. But where you said that one in gray is not adjacent, I didn't know why that would automatically be ruled out.
It's not ruled out. They're all there. It's just we've been tracking the sale of properties near the sewage treatment plant since I've been there for over 20 years, and there's been no movement. And then all of a sudden, since two of them went like that, and we weren't ready to jump. And one went on, obviously was on the market, but we weren't at a place where we could acquire 6. And then the other one went off market. So we are going to have to try. This is why we're here, to see if we can get council direction, so we at least can try and be a little more nimble. And the next time we come would be a closed session for negotiations.
Yeah, it's always better to have more options when you're trying to get something that's right in that vicinity. And so my last question ties in with your last comment, which is that I think council on the legal counsel, not council, is saying that basically we're just authorizing you to explore this at this point. There's no numbers on the table, basically to spend time, resources on it is kind of the extent of our commitment. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, that is the staff recommendation.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
And
I'm supportive.
And while I have the mic, just a bit of context around Measure E. I see several members of the council are factoring that into their thoughts tonight. The Measure E ballot language is very explicit on what exactly could be located on that site. Mentions biosolids, yard trimming, and food waste processing facilities. So anything other than that would require us to go back to the voters and get separate approval for whatever it is contemplated. And so one of the constraints we're facing right now is time, and the prospect of having to go back to the prospect of maybe looking at the Measure E site for, say, a lab building or a warehouse would, I think, require us to have to go back to the voters. Don't know what that time frame looks like, don't know if that would get approved. And so we're looking at this essentially as a belt and suspenders approach to acquire the other parcels that are adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you for the reminder. Councilmember Tanaka.
Yeah, thank you for you guys' work on this. So I assume as we get closer to trying to maybe purchase some of these properties, we're going to ask our neighbors to pay up. Is that the way it works?
There would be some form of cost sharing between the partners.
Okay.
We haven't worked out specifics on that yet.
Okay, great. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want us to be bearing the whole cost. I think from what I understand from previous meetings, the infrastructure cost is fixed between the different cities, although the actual operating cost is variable. And because other cities around us have grown and they actually have higher usage, I assume that we're going to renegotiate the infrastructure split to be actual usage versus some sort of fixed percentage.
Well, actually, that whole issue with the capital capacity versus operation share split is one of the things we're studying in this long range facilities plan update that Karin mentioned. We would certainly want to have a methodology most advantageous to the city for this transaction. There are different options for how that might be structured, some of which might fall under either of those models. So that's something we'll need to look at.
Okay.
But understood that we would prefer to do something where our allocation fell under the operation share rather than capital capacity.
Yeah, well, I guess my main point is it just seems a little bit unfair that we pay more of the infrastructure cost, even though by population, by usage is less. So that's my main point. Okay. You guys spoke a little bit about it, but I wanted to push into a little bit more. But I mean, do all the workers need to be on site, or can they just be in other places? Because there's a lot of vacant office space in our city right now. So can it just be like a few buildings down? Can it be across the freeway? I mean, I think Councilman Long asked about the gray building. You know, I was also thinking the same thing. Because that gives us a lot more flexibility versus having to get right adjacent. Because it doesn't sound like you guys are trying to necessarily expand the industrial use onto these, potentially new properties, but really more just the people use, office use.
So great question. The people that are currently at 1900, most of them are inspectors, and they actually are on the site at the sewage treatment plant because they collect samples. They have to drop it off at the lab. They need to have close proximity. They're in and out of their trucks, and they're also changing their uniforms on campus. And so that's why we're adjacent. Jamie Allen is actually our plant manager, and he's also at 1900. So he is walking back and forth to the plant all the time to manage the construction, his operations team. So we're all integrated. There's 80 of us, but there's not a lot of people that are, quote, just office. Most of us are integrated right into the campus. We're a little bit different than engineering staff that might be here. So
are there people that can be located offsite without impact to their work?
Not many of the staff that are located there.
Not many or none?
No, there's probably a handful. I could be located somewhere else, and I'm currently at 1900.
I see.
But it's nice to be close to my staff because there's also a benefit of being close proximity to the people that you manage.
I see.
And that
Okay.
you work with.
Okay. And then I think the point about understanding the flows from the other cities makes sense, especially if there's a tremendous amount of stormwater leakage into the sewers. I think that'd be good to know, and knowing who's doing that would be also good. If it's our city, then we should fix it, or some other city should fix it. So I think having a good understanding of that would be good, because I saw nothing like that in the report. And the other thing I was curious about is why buy? Why not just rent? Why not just get a long-term lease? Like, what's the point about buying?
So our goal, if we currently we're renting, which is what we're doing.
Yes, why not just keep renting?
If we're renting, but we're also looking for laboratory space. Our current lab, I'd urge you to come and look at it. It is stuck in the stone ages, and it's a safety issue. And we put it on the priority list for a long time, but other things obviously get raised, and spacing and engineering support is also part of the problem. We're currently rebuilding the sewage treatment plant. We're estimating around $300 million right now. The lab is one of the many projects that we're trying to work on, is just trying to figure out the space. And if we could find a parcel that's already adjacent and might not trying, to basically squish it between two massive pipelines, which is the only place we've identified on our parcel, it'll make hopefully the construction costs a little bit less and easier.
Okay, I guess I still don't understand why not just rent, because in commercial world, right, it's very, very common to have long-term leases and you can build whatever you want on the land. So what's the, I guess I'm missing.
So I also look out for the 50-year horizon of the sewage treatment plant. This is not a structure that's going to leave. So if we end up buying and we build a lab and then there's a treatment process that we're required to do in the future, we're going to have some land to do it. Right now, we're so space limited. We're struggling and kind of scratching our heads as to where we're going to put the next upgrade when there is a new regulation coming down the pipeline. So I view this as future proofing our facility for hopefully 50 years, but a couple acres isn't going to get us there, but it's at least going to get us a little bit closer than no acres.
I see. Okay, all time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just to ask, so will you be presenting to our partners as well, any of this expansion?
So we've already talked to our partners about the adjacent parcels, or at least not the council members, but our partners. They typically, and if we need the space, they usually have been supportive of it. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And in the report, it talks about that there might be, that it might involve some risk regarding acquiring the land in advance of completing the long-range financial plan. Can you kind of tell us?
The long-range facility plan. So that's right now we're currently out for bid for updating our long-range facility plan. We're also trying to acquire land. It's kind of one of those things. If we acquire the land while we're in the process of long-range facility plan, then hopefully we can incorporate that into our planning documents. So I think that's the risk that we run. If we buy the land and then we can't identify how we're going to use it, but I don't anticipate that being a problem right now with how space limited we are.
Yeah, I don't anticipate that either. So I read about the funding plan, and yes, I also encourage that once acquired, and if it's acquired, that should consider honoring the existing leases. For many years, I also spoke about the need for land to remain vacant that belongs to the city, specifically for these kind of matters, where there is the pre and during construction periods, and we've seen that at CalAF as well as the public safety building, where there's the need for staging, lay down areas and contractor trailers, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is wise. And, I also believe that it is actually a benefit for the city to have ownership of certain pieces of land for its own use. So I will be supporting moving this forward and your recommendation. I don't see any other lights. All right, so if anybody would like to make a motion, or do you have any instructions, city attorney, city manager? Council Member Lowing.
I move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Would you like to speak to your motion?
No, the answers were very good to all of our questions, and I think it's worth exploration.
Councilmember Byrd?
Yes, I'd just like to offer an amendment to the third recommendation to capture what I think council members noted here, which is that when staff returns to council with recommendations for purchase of property contiguous to the treatment plant, and to report on stormwater infiltration and the potential use of 5 acres of the Measure E site.
I guess as the maker, I have to They're in conference now.
Yeah, you would.
Is that wording acceptable?
I was going to say that the last part, the potential use of the 5 acres of the Measure E site might go better with 1.
That would be fine.
But also, I wanted to hear what staff have to say, and
Yeah.
you might have to include language when you return about the ballot, about what the initiative language is.
I think we understand the intent and that the essential message is that prior to being able to exercise purchase of additional property, we need to address how it relates both to the Measure E site as well as how the capacity may be or the need for capacity may be driven by stormwater infiltration. So I think those can go in parallel, and we'll see how the pieces come together.
Yeah, the city manager captured the intent. If it's not clear, I'd be glad to clarify it.
And a question is, you said that you wanted to have the ability of being nimble when something like this comes up. So are we going to be delaying your nimbleness with all of this extra instruction?
In some fashion, yes, but what I would say is that what the level of detail of the analysis we would bring you would not be at the level of what we're going to get out of our long range facilities plan update, which is going to take a couple of years. So if we come back to you, we're going to bring the level of analysis that we can put together relatively quickly to share.
And if I might note, 1 and 2 just are authorizing staff to go ahead with exploration of the purchase and exploration of funding options for the purchase. So we're not saying don't do anything until we hear back. Just when you come back next, we'd like to get a broader context.
And they don't have to come back all together at the same time.
We need to
So
make
is staff comfortable with that as an amendment to 3, or do you want it as a separate number 4?
I'm comfortable with 3. It's fine.
Okay, we'll add that to 3 and I'll accept it.
Councilmember Tanaka.
Yeah, in general, I support this motion. One thing I was thinking about and wanted to see if the maker and seconder might be open to it is that in commercial real estate, sometimes people just don't sell, but they will give you a super long-term lease, like 50 or 100-year lease. And so just give staff more flexibility. I know they're really keen on purchasing, and that could be good too, but maybe we can't get a purchase, right? Maybe it's only a rent or a lease. So I was wondering if the seconder and the maker and the seconder would be open to saying on one making a purchase or lease.
I might on a long-term lease. I'd like to hear staff's thoughts.
Let's have the first motion maker go.
Yeah, it seems like the clear intent of staff is to have controllable land forever. And so the direction that we're asking for is to explore the purchase of property. It seems like rental is by definition a backup plan that would have to be looked at. And they don't want it to be a primary plan. So it seems kind of premature in some sense, but also obvious in another sense that it's probably not necessary. That'd be my thoughts. But staff?
I think that's correct, that our preference would be to purchase. Now, if we were to go and talk to all these property owners and find that none of them were willing to offer for purchase, but they were willing to consider a long-term lease, I think we'd be open to considering that. For reasons we've said, we're not very interested in short-term leases. There's a little bit of apprehension already about the staff we have in this other building that we're hearing the property owner is willing to sell and what that could mean for our lease and planning for that moving forward.
So Councilmember Lowing, do you accept the,
No, I don't think we need it. So, and I got the staff input, but Councilmember Burt.
Councilmember Byrne?
Well, if we don't put it in, what we just heard is that staff's preferences of purchase, I think we agree. But that if they can't do that, then they would, second choice would be a long-term lease. If we don't put that in the motion, we haven't authorized them to pursue a long-term lease. So I would say that, why don't we modify one to say, explore the purchase, and if not available, if the parcels are not available for purchase, to explore a long-term lease.
That's fine, or the current language is fine.
Well, the current language would not enable them to do the next negotiation, which is long-term lease if they can't purchase.
That's up to the attorney.
I think just for purpose of clarity, purchase means purchase. And if you want the motion to reflect some additional flexibility on the part of the staff to evaluate a long-term lease as well, it's fine to include.
So somehow make it secondarily in the language.
Maybe explore long-term lease options as secondary. You got it? Oh, okay, thank you.
That's fine.
Councilmember Tanaka, is that all?
That's the main thing. I was just thinking, I think staff, you guys plan to do this already, but just confirming. And I asked you this many times, so you know my intent, which is that we get the other cities to pay up on their infrastructure side, right? And so I think you guys are planning to do that. So I'm not sure we need this in the motion per se, but if you guys aren't planning to do that, maybe we should put it in the motion.
We are planning to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilmember Vinker?
Yeah, just to clarify and following up on my comments before. So my memory is that when we discussed the Measure E site, it wasn't just what can we do with the Measure E site, it was should we acquire other property because of the issues with the Measure E site and rededicating the parkland and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not clear if we're now collapsing that direction to explore availability of other lands. We talked about 10 acres. Is there any other space with this? Or whether that's still understood to be a separate ask from us?
We're understanding it as a separate ask that's on a longer term path with the planning process. Whereas for these potential property acquisitions, we're trying to set ourselves up to be able to move quickly if there's a deal to be made.
Okay, good. So that was what I was hoping, is that we are still pursuing both things. Okay, thank you.
All right, I don't see any other lights. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote, please?
Councilmember Lithcott-Hames,
Yes.
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Burt,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stone,
Yes.
Mayor Ku,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think this concludes this item, although I wanted to ask Madam Clerk and also my colleagues, because we proceeded so efficiently, I see that there is member of the public that might want to speak on public item. So if you will allow that, please, so that we can hear from the public.
Do you need a motion to reopen public comment? Because if so, I'll make
Yeah,
one.
do we need a motion? No.
Okay, good.
So we'll just go ahead and reopen public comments. Madam Clerk?
Good evening, everybody, Council and Mayor Koo. I'm Andrea Guerra. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of 350 Palo Alto. A few months ago, when the SCAP was up for consideration, Council Member Lowing asked what we thought was a really important question. How are we going to pay for this? That question prompted our group, in collaboration with other climate activists, to look at the finances more closely, particularly around building electrification. The Palo Alto City staff has already done substantial work on this, so I'm going to start by laying out some important conclusions from their preliminary studies, which were completed in 2021. Then I'm going to move on to what's changed and why we think that the outlook is even brighter. Next slide. As you know, staff has concluded that to meet our SCAP commitments, virtually all single-family homes and all commercial rooftop HVAC units must be electrified, as well as significant additional multifamily and commercial buildings. Next slide, please. In order to reach that goal, staff found that we need an order of magnitude scale up of electrification, reaching 2,000 to 3,000 full home retrofits starting by 2024. Staff has predicted that voluntary programs, including education, outreach, have a low probability of getting us to those kind of numbers. Reaching our goal will likely require a high intervention action, such as mandating electrification by a certain date. Next slide, please. So what will it cost to meet our SCAP commitments? Staff has found that the best way to approach this is to incentivize a combination of vehicle and building electrification, because EVs offer a clear savings that help to offset the building electrification costs. Their model includes all necessary electrical appliances plus EV charging infrastructure, as well as some preliminary funding for electrical infrastructure and decommissioning the gas infrastructure. They also made the assumption that upfront costs could be spread out over the life of the equipment. So what they found was a net cost of roughly $10 million annually through the year 2032. And to put that in context, that is less than 5% of our annual community energy expenditures. After 2033, the staff model showed a net benefit to the community. Next slide, please. I want to stop there and emphasize that conclusion because I think it's pretty amazing. For a fairly modest community investment, we can shrink our climate footprint enormously, get within reach of our SCAP commitments, and in just 9 years, we could potentially be seeing a financial return on that investment. Financing options for the initial investment could include some combination of low-interest loans, which are available to our electrical utility, on-bill financing, which we've used with our heat pump water heater program, a community-supported bond measure, or possibly a voluntary fee to help lower-income Palo Alto residents electrify, as put forth by Councilmember Burt. Next slide, please. The staff's 2021 model predicts that the economics of citywide electrification are decent, and they could pay off in under a decade. But I want to talk a little bit about what's changed since that modeling was done and why we think things are even better now. Next slide. First, there has been an enormous influx of federal electrification incentives. That could be a real game changer. For single-family households of lower to moderate income, which is defined as under $200,000 per year in our area, those residents are eligible for up to over $16,000 in rebates starting in 2024. That includes rebates for heat pump water heaters and HVAC systems, electrical panel upgrades and wiring, plus induction cooktops and electric dryers. Multifamily buildings where 50% or more of the residents are in that same income category are eligible for the same rebates. And finally, all Palo Alto residents right now are eligible for up to $4,600 in tax credits for heat pump water heaters and heat pump HVAC systems. Next slide, please. Many homeowners are also going to be able to layer those federal incentives with new state incentives, bringing down costs even further. You can see those incentives on the slide. Next slide, please. And finally, staff is currently looking at participation in California's Go Green financing program, which offers low-cost loans to Californians electrifying their home. Next slide. I also want to touch briefly on the principle of right sizing advanced by former CPAU engineer Tom Cabot, and now supported by many electrification experts. If we take those principles into account, city electricity needs are likely lower than what was modeled in 2021. For instance, many homes don't need a service upgrade if they have a 100 amp or greater existing service. Also, more 120 volt appliances are coming online. Next slide. There are two other trends I want to talk about that could bring electrification costs or make electrification more economical, I should say. First, industry experts are predicting that natural gas prices are likely to start going up mid-decade in California. Second, while heat pump appliances do have a higher upfront costs, as with most technologies coming into wider adoption, prices are projected to come down, which would shorten the payback period. And of course, once that equipment is in, the higher efficiency is going to mean savings for our homeowners. So if we look at CPAU rates today, people who have a heat pump HVAC have operating costs at about half of the gas people who have a gas equivalent system. Next slide, please. So the Palo Alto Council, as you know, with the support of the voters in this community, has made a commitment to an 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. Science, of course, is telling us that that is the window when we need to act. Today, we're asking council to act on the important findings of staff and seize on this moment when there are new incentives and an easier path to electrification than we've ever had before. We are eagerly awaiting the new SCAP funding study, but in the meantime, we believe we have to continue to act on the findings we already have. We urge council to name a natural gas sunset date by the end of this calendar year to give us the most time to make an equitable electrification plan. Based on the science and our city staff's own conclusions, we believe that date should be no later than 12/31/2030. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Nels DeLander.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Nels DeLander. I'm a field representative of the NorCal Carpenters Union. I speak on behalf of the working class construction workers of the community. It is important that any future construction has area standards. By area standards, I mean livable wages, health care, local hire, and have skilled apprentices. Workers need to be paid a livable wage rate so they can make enough money to take care of themselves and their families, especially with the cost of living in the Bay Area increasing with inflation as time goes on. Construction sites can be very dangerous and accidents happen all the time. Having health coverage should be mandatory for all construction workers. Instead, a lot of contractors expect them to pay with their own coverage with the little money they pay them. It's not right. All future projects should also utilize local hire. We want workers to be able to work within their own communities so they can get back to their families at a reasonable time. How are they supposed to raise their own children? Too many workers are out driving for hours to get home. It not only hurts the time with their families, but it adds to way more traffic on the roads. Not to mention, a lot of projects that happen in the area are being built by out-of-state contractors and their workers. Out-of-state contractors can afford to outbid projects. We need to make a change with that. We should also include apprentices in all future projects. Having trade apprentices makes job sites safer, produces quality work, job sites are on budget and on time. Also, by having apprentices, we are building the future workforce of our own community. We should all want future projects to be safe, workers to be taken care of, and be successful, and projects to be successful the community of Palo Alto can utilize and enjoy. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Aram James.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Good evening. So I'm looking at the Daily Post, page 6, Thursday, August 17th, 2023. And yes, the trial over the Black Lives Matter mural set for the summer of 2024. Can you imagine? I here are these 5 current members of the Palo Alto Police Department and 6 members retired, but Eric Figueroa, Michael Foley, Robert Parham, Julie Tannick, David Ferrari, and the gentleman that retired, Chris Moore. The level of anger and hate they must have towards Black people, it's something I can't measure. But to me, when I look at this, this is, hey, well, I could be wrong. Maybe a jury of 12 people will feel differently, but it looks to me like just coming out of pure hate for Black people and a frivolous lawsuit, to say the least. I've talked about it before, letters and to you all, but we also, the optics of having an all-white management command staff in Palo Alto, still having Zach Perone on the payroll. It's an Antioch waiting to happen. You could say, well, wait a minute, Aram. Antioch? Well, it's because of a whistleblower that all of that stuff came to the fore. Their canine unit, nobody was watching the canine unit. And that one officer had, I don't know, bites in the 20s. And it was disgusting. But the point is, the city council, and certainly not the city manager, isn't watching over that stuff. You can't tell me how many times the new dog handler has released the canine out on people and what the racial breakdown is. So we're not really watching our police officers. They are being given an undue amount of trust. And, maybe you trust the police after you know what's going on with them, but we don't. People are closing their eyes in Palo Alto. And yes, Antioch could happen in Palo Alto, as I've said so many times. This department has a long, memorialized, recorded history of systemic racism, disproportionate policing on African-American people, going back for as long as I've lived in Palo Alto, the bulk of my 70 years. And it's still there today. The first RIPA data that the police chief, Andrew Bender, looked at, thumbed his nose, showed that we were still doing the same thing. But you all have got to be the watchers. Thank you.
This concludes public comments on items that are not on the agenda. And with that, we're going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
there is a requirement under the city ordinances that there be a notice of tenants' rights that's included in every rental agreement or lease, and that requires that tenants and owners participate in mandatory mediation. I have not seen anything that would indicate that that process is not working. Unless there was a demonstrated need, why people either aren't using the mediation process or that it hasn't resolved disputes. I think the enactment of additional regulations, which require even further notice from the property owner to the tenant, and which would serve as a complete bar to an eviction action or an action for rent, is really imposing too much of a regulation in an area that needs to be regulated, but needs to be regulated in a reasonable manner. And I initially got this notice of tenants' rights by contacting the city that gave me a number in Santa Clara. This afternoon, I did a Google search with the Google search engine, notice of tenants' right form Palo Alto. It did not come up with this. I did a Google search for a notice of tenants' rights Palo Alto. It also did not come up with this. I think that the current regulations should be enforced and the state regulations should be enforced, but I think imposing this on units up to a fourplex is just creating an unreasonable burden because it's a complete bar to collecting rent or evicting a tenant who may be bothering other tenants as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And with that, we're adjourned.